Hello there. This is in addition to a main scripted video I made on mindset and tilting. I realized during the production of that video that I had a lot more things that I wanted to talk about, but that wouldn't really fit into the video nicely without derailing the topic too much and exploding the video length. So that's why I'm creating this video, which is kind of an unscripted one where I ramble about some of my thoughts that didn't fit into the video. I'll just be playing some random background footage. This is just playing in a tournament or in Sando queue with some friends with really wacky comps. Okay. The first thing that I want to mention is that the video was very focused on tilt. Mindset is more than just not tilting, basically. I kind of used tilt as a way to basically structure the video. To bring up like other aspects of mindset, for example, like improvement-based mindset instead of a result-oriented one. Ultimately, the video didn't capture all aspects of mindset because of that, and that was never the goal. The goal was that I wanted to talk about what I felt was most important about mindset, which is basically tilting and staying in a positive headspace instead of like a one where you tilt about the game and are unhappy with your improvement. Your mindset can be impacted by a lot of other things. That could like include nervousness, anxiousness, panic, any other kind of mental health things that impact you in real life. And for a lot of those, I don't really feel qualified to talk about that. If you struggle with something like that, please seek professional assistance instead of listening to a random YouTuber. Okay, that's kind of out of the way. Something I wanted to talk about is the kind of models that I brought up in the video. So that would include kind of the model that I created of tilt being, like a lot of tilt being either like outward focused or inward focused. But it would also include models such as like the skill graph. Models are always something that is that are not entirely true. Models always try to capture something, but they won't be like, they won't always apply, they won't always be perfect. Every model is basically false. However, models are also useful, and that's why we do them. They are basically a way of capturing what's important about a topic, or capturing something that like usually applies, and putting that into a useful format. So for example, for the tilt model, something that I hope to have communicated clearly in the video is that tilt is highly individual, and tilting is more than just those two forms. That kind of outward focused tilt where you kind of think about the game as being outside of your control, and that kind of inward focused thing where you like pressure yourself too much, where you put too much responsibility on yourself, or like are overly critical about your mistakes, or just flat out feel bad about losing, because that's something that kind of also falls into that category in my mind. It's a bit weird. Some other examples I wanted to bring up for outward focused tilt, so the kind of tilt where like you push responsibility away from yourself, is lag. That would be the first one. And lag is something that comes up often because it's a really easy thing to talk about and to basically push responsibility away, because it is completely outside of your control, unless you have like a connection that you could theoretically improve by putting in a LAN cable or something. But usually like either it's not your fault or it is your fault, but like you don't have the resources to actually like pay for a LAN cable or something. So it usually like you can't really impact it. And that's why I feel like it comes up often in those kind of contexts. What I find interesting about it is that some forms of tilt, for example, or like some forms of lag, for example, stuff like what you'd experience in like Japanese lobbies, like when you're playing Japanese X rank. What's really interesting there is that in my mind, or at least I'd started out because like sometimes I played in like other lobbies or like Japanese lobbies basically. When I first started out, that lag also really annoyed me and caused me a bunch of tilt. Over time, it kind of led to like something a bit different for me, at least, where I realized that that kind of lag is basically helpful for me to make better decisions, because in like Japanese lobbies, what usually happens is like there's a bit of latency, and because of that, even though you like move out of the aim or whatever on your screen, you still get shot. And at least the mindset shift that I took in response to that was that I just need to position myself smarter, that I need to not be in their line of sight for that long in the first place, and just to play smarter instead of like relying so much on mechanical outplay. That's kind of the approach that I took to that form of lag. There's also like forms of lag that are just like kind of like someone has a bad connection and they just teleport all around, and that just isn't competitive anymore. Usually I just respond to that by like laughing about it, but it's something where I understand tilting about it a bit more. The other tilt, or like response to being tilted, that I see come up surprisingly often is like the kind of response where we say the game design is bad, where we like more or less just complain about like, I hate this game, I hate Zuka, stuff like that. And I think a lot of time that is brought up kind of jokingly, and I get that. It's a fun thing to just kind of joke about, because it's an easy way to like make jokes with people who like maybe you don't know as well yet. So you have like a common thing you can talk about, which is that this game's netcode is bad, or this game's design is bad, or whatever. At the same time, it's a bit weird, because it's still a way of like pushing responsibility away in some cases. Sometimes I don't think it does that much harm, but there is still some truth behind joking. Behind like every kind of joke, there is still some sort of truth behind it, and I think especially in that case that shows in quite a strong way. That's kind of everything I have to talk about there. I don't really have a big conclusion. Yeah. Something I talked about at the end of the video, like I brought up very shortly, is mindset around like learning, around school or university or stuff like that. Because what I see a lot in especially school, or what I saw a lot when I was in school, is that a lot of people would put a very big focus on grades and basically make grades the purpose of school, of learning. And to me that was always a bit counterproductive. Or like not always. There was a point where I had the same kind of idea, because I guess it's just passed down through generations that school is about having good grades, because with good grades you get into like a good university, and then with a good university you get into a good job, and then you make much money, and that's what's important about life. But like, to me, especially in the last few years I had in school, it was way more important to actually like learn, because that's what school is there for. It's so you can like get a good understanding of a few like quite important topics. A lot of ideas that also come up often is like, school, like subjects in school aren't important. They teach you stuff that like no one cares about. And I just don't think that's really true. I think there's a good point in just having a baseline understanding of like anything, of any subject that's taught in school. And there's some subjects in specific that I think are just really important flat out. So like stuff like mathematics, just because it's the basics of a lot of stuff that's going on in our current modernized world. Stuff like languages, because a part of what you learn in like languages is to recognize when like there's manipulation going on, to recognize in speeches by politicians or whatever, to be able to analyze how they are talking and what kind of effect that has. And that's just in terms of like our world that we live in my opinion, really important. And it kind of applies to a lot of other stuff as well. We'll look at this game because the umbrella is a fun weapon. Oh, I didn't want to upload it. I just wanted to play it. Oops. Okay. So that's kind of the thing about school that I always found weird, and the mindset around that I feel like is somewhat derivative of like Splatoon mindset as well. To like see what like your Splatoon mindset is, and that your Splatoon mindset is like so improvement oriented, when your school mindset is so like result oriented around grades, and that maybe isn't the greatest idea. So that's why I brought that up there. Okay. The next thing that I think might take a bit longer to talk about is my journey of tilt in competitive Splatoon, because I think there are some interesting points there that I feel like are interesting to bring up. Because at the start of competitive, I think I joined like I started out in a way that a lot of people do, which is like with a relatively common mindset where you don't necessarily tilt that badly, like you don't get angry at or anything, but you still like feel bad when you lose. It's still like you aren't quite at the level of improvement-based mindset where you can say like, I don't care about losing because I improved, which is kind of the ultimate goal. And that kind of makes sense to me, to just start out in a way where like you're really dependent on wins and losses. And kind of moving away from that, breaking out of that, I think was a larger part of my kind of competitive improvement journey. It takes time, for sure. It's something where like, unless you have like a big kind of revelation, it just takes time to get to the conclusion, or like to improve your mindset to a level where you don't care about losing anymore. I think it's something that is difficult for a lot of people, because just inherently your brain is conditioned to like winning. Your brain sends out dopamine hormones when you like make a kill or like when you win a game, and your brain feels bad when that isn't there. And so it's kind of natural, but also it hinders your progress. It'd be way cooler, just like in terms of progress and also in terms of like just enjoyment, if you didn't have to worry about like feeling bad that you lose a game. And that's kind of what I think is interesting about kind of thinking about that part of mindset, is that it's not easy to break a result-oriented mindset, especially in like the competitive environment that we're in right now, because it's a very widespread environment. It's an environment that is constantly encouraged through something like badges, through something like the community responding very loudly just to winning a tournament, and getting a lot of praise for just winning a tournament, and that always feels really good. But because it feels so good, it also feels bad if that doesn't happen. And that's kind of the weird part about it. Sploosh. Something that on a team that I was for like the majority of my competitive journey, so BLK. Something that happened kind of at the start and throughout the middle of the life of that team is it would happen a lot that we'd just basically would go silent in VC when losing. And that kind of comes back to just feeling bad about losses and not knowing how to deal with it. And I want to bring up there that tilt in like team VCs is really infectious. If someone starts like not talking, if someone in VC feels that kind of way, that is something that others do notice. If not consciously, then definitely subconsciously. That is something that will definitely be heard, and that kind of everyone else in the VC then responds to, and it's kind of a feedback loop, where it just gets worse, basically. What we kind of did as a result of that, when we realized how big of a problem it was, is we tried to shift our mindset away from playing tournaments for winning, so like trying to win low ink, trying to like get the badges, trying to win Minnow Cup or whatever, and instead try to just play tournaments for practice, play tournaments to get better. And I think that helped us a lot there. We also played a lot more like open level tournaments when like we were still eligible for low ink. And that was really good for us in terms of improvement, because actually just like playing in low level is a lot easier for improvement. You get much better practice usually, because like you fight better opponents. But also for mindset, because we didn't feel pressured to win that tournament anymore when we went into it. We just went into a tournament to play it, and to like get practice, and we'd know we'd not win, because how the fuck would we win Paddling Pool? That's just not something that would happen. But we could go into it and get practice, and then if we would get a cool upset against like some high-level players, that would feel amazing. But we wouldn't feel the kind of downs when we lost, because that would just be the norm. Because like it's an open level tournament. As a low level team, you can just expect yourself to like go 2-1 or maybe 2-2 if you are having a nice day. And yeah, that's kind of how we dealt with that as a team. Something that was also a huge issue from between times is kind of specifically between me and another team member, is that we'd kind of get into, or like we'd bring up points that where like we thought we did something wrong as a team, or like where we thought the other person did something wrong in a game, and we weren't quite at a place yet where we were able to phrase that in a way that it wouldn't tilt us, because bringing up thoughts on how someone else did bad in a game is always rough. It's always something that's not easy, because you always have to like watch out that it doesn't tilt them, because like it's really easy to get tilted by people saying something like that. And that took us a while to like deal with that. I think the important part in how we ended up actually like kind of dealing with it in the end is that we had a conversation where we just talked about how like that kind of stuff made us feel, and how basically what we said impacted us, and why that's specifically how we phrased it would like tilt the other person. And that was kind of, I think, the point where it turned around into a way healthier place for us, because we wouldn't, like, we'd know what part of what we said would tilt the other person, and then we'd know how to avoid it. Yeah. And that kind of got to a point where at the end of the team, or like throughout the last like maybe 6 months or so, the players that had been on the team for a long time, we all knew each other really well, so we all knew really well how we would tilt. And that was really, really nice, because we were really consistent in just knowing how we need to talk to each other to not tilt us. And basically meant like we could just stay in an analytical mindset as a team, or at least the players that had been on the team for like most of its lifespan could do that. And that's just that's really cool, and I think that's something where being on a team for a very long time is really beneficial, because you kind of get to know each other really well, and you can improve your mindset together really easily. And that's something that kind of hit me in a shock when I left that team and I didn't play for a while, and then I joined another team, or like made another team. That's something that kind of shocked me there, because throughout the last few months of BLK, I just was in a space where I basically never tilted. It was a really consistent environment with like pretty much the same teammates every time. And even if some of them would like get into small forms of tilt, the most, like the biggest part of the team would just be able to stay analytical, and that was like really, really cool and really consistent. And that wasn't there anymore on that new team, because I was playing with new people. And I wasn't aware at the time how much my mindset was basically based on that specific mindset of BLK, of the team I'd been on for like more than a year. I don't know, I think a year and a half, I'm actually not sure right now. For a very long time, basically. And through that, just like having different teammates and some other like different personal experiences, me having to play tabletop a lot more, for example, tilt, like personally, I tilted a decent amount on that team, mostly around like feeling as if I had to play very well to keep the game alive or stuff like that, and then especially feeling bad if I didn't play well, because like especially when I was on tabletop, I personally always felt that I didn't play well. It's kind of a thing where like at this point I don't want to play on tabletop anymore, because just like how kind of annoying it is, or it was on that team, for me, and how it impacted me in like my gameplay and my mental. And that's kind of interesting. So I just wanted to bring up that personal experience, because it's really interesting to me, how like I had a really consistent mindset, really consistently good mindset, when I had a really consistent team, basically. A team that I played with for a lot of time. And that kind of carries over into solo queue as well. But that then changed once I was on a different team. And it, like, all of the people on Flourish, like the second team, are really smart people, and people that are good at the game, and people that are really smart about tilting and don't easily get into a tilting mindset. Maybe even like more emotionally smart than the people I was on BLK. I played with on BLK. But it was still just like a different environment to me, and I think that's what like made the biggest difference there. It's just like interesting to me. Yeah, getting like again, team tilt is something that's way more difficult to deal with than tilt like individually, tilt in solo queue. Because in solo queue you only have to work on yourself. In team tilt you have to work with like other people, and you have to have open conversations about how your teammates tilt. And what impacts, like what about your words impact their tilting and stuff like that. And like that were the kind of discussions that we didn't have on Flourish, and that eventually like played a part in disbanding that team, because we didn't have those conversations openly enough, while we had those conversations, for example, on BLK, which is, I think, part of the reason that that team in specific stayed for like so long. And kind of, especially when you are already tilted, that is difficult to get out of. Tilt is a feedback loop. It's a negative feedback loop. When you tilt, you play worse. When your team tilts, then your team gets tilted as well. Or like, when you tilt, your team gets tilted. When your team tilts, you get tilted. All of that is a negative feedback loop. And because of that, it's really difficult to get out of. It's kind of... in that context, I kind of want to bring up feedback loop just in general, because it's something that impacts your brain a lot. Your brain like works on a lot of feedback loops. For example, it's basically confirmation bias, which basically means if you have an opinion about something, then you're much more likely to filter, or like to hear more positive opinions about that, because your brain tries to filter out like other opinions and tries to focus on the opinions that align with your view. That's something that is really important to understand about how your brain works, because it's a really crucial part, and it's a part that in our modern like world is really detrimental. So like that applies in politics a lot. That applies when like having opinions of other people a lot. Something that often happens is like once you like have an initial opinion of someone else, like of a classmate, of like a teacher, of like anyone you're working with, any kind of that opinion tends to be reinforced. And that's like a feedback loop that that's just how your brain works. And if you aren't careful about that, then that can really mess up like who you're close with and who you talk to a lot. And like what kind of political views you have, because it can kind of happen that you just get into a pipeline where you continuously think about or like also get like social media news about that, because social media wants to just give you more stuff of what you already believe about, but also just like from your brain, to filter out like different news that don't align with your views. So kind of feedback loops are a really important part about how your brain works, and they are really important in Tilt as well. Yeah, and like those kind of feedback loops, that kind of confirmation bias, plays a big part in competitive Splatoon as well, and a big part in tilting, and a big part of like who you play with and what you think of the people you play with. I had a relatively like negative relation with or like how I thought about the people I played with on Flourish, just because I'd like in some friend groups that I was in, there was like a lot of negative bias around those people, and unconsciously my brain kind of picked that up and thought of them like, well, they were still my friends and I still liked playing with them and appreciated everything about them. There was an unconscious part of me, or like a subconscious part of me, that thought less positively of them because of that. So like it impacts you more than you think. And And kind of feedback loops are really important in tilting as well. When you tilt, that is a negative feedback loop. And when you have a good mindset, that is a positive feedback loop. Because having a good mindset usually means that you play better. And that makes it easier to stay in a good mindset. Or even when you play bad, if you can separate yourself from losing, that is makes it super easy to just stay in a good mindset, basically. So being in a good mindset makes it easier to be in a good mindset, and being in a bad mindset makes it more difficult to switch to a good mindset. And that's why I think the kind of biggest part about dealing with tilt is kind of starting out in a positive headspace, and kind of working from there, because it's a lot easier to do that instead of constantly being tilted and then having to get out of being tilted. That said, sometimes you just end up being tilted, and sometimes you have to move from being tilted to being in a good headspace in a short amount of time, because maybe you're playing a tournament where you don't really have a choice because you want to keep going, stuff like that. And that is the point where I didn't talk about it that much in the video. I kind of brought up setting up routines, setting up habits, stuff like taking a 3-minute break, stuff like taking a 5-hour break, taking a break of a whole day, stuff like getting a glass of water and drinking something. And those are all good ways of doing it. And I think that is another point where tilt is really individual, and you have to kind of find your own individual solutions, because that is a mental part that is really difficult, and you kind of have to find routines, in my opinion, to get out of that. Those kind of routines, those kind of mental resets that you can always do, and are very easy to do, basically, are really valuable. It kind of goes to a point I brought up in the old video about the SBA that I made, and with old I mean I don't know, half a year ago, which is crazy at this point, about activation energy, how doing things is a lot easier when the activity, the amount of energy you need to start that activity, is low. So for example, bringing up YouTube is really easy to do, and you do that a lot just because the action of unlocking your phone and opening the app is really, really easy, while doing something like going jogging or doing sports or something like that is mentally not as easy, because you have to prepare for it, and it takes a bit more activation energy to actually do it. And that's a big part of cognitive behavioral therapy, at least to the degree that I understand it, because again, I'm not a therapist at all. I think why those kind of routines are really valuable, because it's something that's in the best case easy to do, stuff like grab a glass of water, step away, take a break from the game, while also being a really consistent tool that you can use to reset about the game, or stuff like that. I have to find other games that I can put into the background of this. Guess Robo. Yeah. To be fair, I think that's pretty much everything I wanted to bring up. Tilt is a really difficult thing to improve on, but at the same time it's one of the most valuable things to improve on, because you learn a lot about yourself and how your brain works when getting better at tilt. And I think that's kind of the part of competitive Splatoon where learning about it is helps you kind of the most in real life. A lot of competition helps you in real life as well. A lot of the competitive Splatoon community is built in a way, or not consciously built, but is set up in a way basically that it helps you in a lot of different areas in real life. And I think tilt is kind of the biggest part of that, because like through the stuff I've talked about in those 2 videos, I hope to have made clear that your mindset can be used to help you with a lot of other parts in life as well. So for example, schoolwork, just having a healthier idea around like just anything in life. And being able to recognize when you aren't in a healthy headspace a lot easier. And so I think it's just like flat out a generally helpful thing to work on your tilt and to work on having a better mindset in Splatoon. And then I think like the best example of the fact that competitive games, especially competitive team games such as this, can really help you get better in more ways than just like the game itself. Okay, thank you for listening to this ramble. It was a bit longer than I wanted it to be, but it kind of goes to show why I had to make this into 2 videos. Like, subscribe, whatever, if you want, I guess. It helps the video get more traction, but I don't really care about it apart from that. So just do whatever you want.